The stagecoach rattled to a stop, dust billowing around its weathered wheels as the last rays of the September sun cast long shadows across the small frontier town of Promise Creek, Wyoming. The year was 1878, and for Olivia Porter, it marked the end of a 3-week journey from Boston and the beginning of a new life that terrified her more than she cared to admit. Her gloved hands clutched the letter that had brought her here, creased from countless readings during her journey west. The driver jumped down and opened the door. "End of the line, miss." Olivia peered out at the dusty main street lined with wooden buildings. This couldn't be Promise Creek. It was so small, so wild, nothing like the respectable Boston neighborhood she'd left behind. Her stomach knotted with anxiety as she thought of the man waiting for her, Ethan Norwood, the cattle rancher whose advertisement she had answered 3 months prior. A man she knew only through a handful of formal, carefully written letters. "Come on now, miss." "Can't sit in there all day," the driver urged. The step down to the ground looked impossibly far. Olivia's legs felt wooden after the long journey, her corset constricting her breathing as panic rose in her chest. I cannot seem to," she stammered, clutching the door frame. A tall figure stepped into her field of vision, blocking the setting sun. Broad-shouldered and lean-hipped, he wore a dust-covered hat and a weathered denim jacket. His face was half hidden in shadow, but she could see the sun-bronzed skin and the watchful blue eyes that seemed to take her measure in an instant. "Miss Porter." His voice was deep, with a gentle drawl she hadn't expected. Olivia swallowed hard. "Mr. Norwood." He nodded, removing his hat to reveal dark blonde hair that caught the fading sunlight. "That'd be me, madam." She tried again to step down, but her skirts caught and she hesitated, mortified by her own timidity. What must he think of her? "I'll catch you if you fall," he said quietly, extending his hand. Something in his voice, a reassurance that went beyond the simple words, made her place her gloved hand in his calloused palm. With surprising gentleness, he helped her from the stagecoach to the dusty ground of Promise Creek, steadying her when her legs threatened to buckle. "Thank you," she whispered, feeling the strength in his hand, noting how he released her the moment she was stable, a gentleman's gesture she hadn't expected from a frontier rancher. "Welcome to Wyoming territory, Miss Porter." His eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. Not quite a smile, but something close. The driver was already unloading her trunk, pitifully small for a woman who had once owned a house full of possessions. Everything she now owned could fit in that single trunk and the carpetbag clutched in her hand. "I hope your journey wasn't too difficult," Ethan said, lifting her trunk with ease. "It was." "Educational," Olivia replied diplomatically, not mentioning the dust, the crowded conditions, or the fear that had been her constant companion since leaving Boston. "My wagon's just down the street," he explained, nodding toward a well-maintained buckboard with 2 chestnut horses waiting patiently. "Town's not much to look at, but we can get supplies before heading to the ranch if you need anything." Olivia glanced down the single dirt street lined with false-fronted buildings, a general store, what appeared to be a saloon, a small church, and assorted businesses. Several curious faces watched them from doorways and windows. She felt suddenly, acutely visible. "I believe I have everything I need for now," she lied, not wanting to extend this public scrutiny any longer than necessary. Ethan nodded, seeming to understand her discomfort. "The ranch is about an hour's ride, not too far." As they walked toward the wagon, Olivia felt the stares of the townspeople. A woman in a store doorway whispered to another, their eyes following her progress down the street. "Don't mind them," Ethan said quietly. "We don't get many new faces out here, especially not mail-order brides." Olivia finished for him, a touch of bitterness in her voice. His eyes met hers, steady and unreadable. "I was going to say city ladies, but yes, that too." He helped her onto the wagon seat with the same careful assistance he'd shown at the stagecoach, then secured her trunk in the back before climbing up beside her. The seat was narrow, forcing them to sit closer than propriety would normally allow, and Olivia was intensely aware of his presence, the clean scent of soap mixed with leather and horses, the careful distance he maintained despite their proximity. As they pulled away from the tiny town, Olivia clutched her carpetbag tightly, wondering what kind of desperate woman would travel 2,000 miles to marry a man she'd never met. She knew the answer, of course. A woman with no other options. A woman like her. The wagon rolled out of town, and Promise Creek quickly disappeared behind them. The vast Wyoming landscape opened before them, rolling grasslands stretching toward distant mountains, painted gold and purple in the fading light. It was beautiful in a wild, untamed way that both frightened and exhilarated her. "It's not Boston," Ethan said, seeming to read her thoughts. "No," she agreed, "it most certainly is not." They rode in silence for several minutes before Olivia gathered her courage. "Mr. Norwood, Ethan," he corrected. "Out here, formalities don't last long." "Ethan," she tried again, the familiarity feeling strange on her tongue. "I should like to be clear about our arrangement." His hands remained steady on the reins, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "I'm listening." "I understand what is expected in a marriage." Heat flooded her cheeks, but she forced herself to continue. "However, I would request a period of acquaintance before we proceed with any ceremony." Now he did look at her, surprise evident in his expression. "You want to court?" "I believe that would be the traditional approach, yes." She kept her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I realize that's not the usual way with arrangements such as ours, but Miss Porter," he interrupted gently. "Olivia, I didn't bring you out here to claim some sort of property. I advertised for a wife, yes, but I expected we'd need time to know each other's minds." He returned his gaze to the road. "There's a small cabin on my property. It was my mother's sewing room. You can stay there while we court." Relief washed over her, followed quickly by confusion. "That's very generous, but won't people talk?" A hint of a smile touched his lips. "People always talk, but my nearest neighbor is 5 miles away, and frankly, what happens at Norwood Ranch isn't their concern." As the wagon crested a small rise, Ethan pointed ahead. "There it is, home." In the valley below, nestled against a backdrop of pine trees, sat a sprawling ranch house built of logs and stone. Several outbuildings clustered nearby, and in the distance, Olivia could make out fenced pastures where cattle grazed. Smoke curled from the chimney, and lamplight glowed in the windows, warm and inviting against the gathering dusk. "It's lovely," she said, and meant it. The ranch had a solidity to it, a permanence that spoke of care and hard work. "Been in my family for 15 years, Ethan said, a note of pride in his voice. "My father built most of it. I added the north wing after he passed." As they approached, a dog ran out to greet them, a black and white border collie that barked enthusiastically. Behind it came an older woman, wiping her hands on her apron. "That's Mrs. Hatcher," Ethan explained. "She's been our housekeeper since my mother died. She'll be heading home after supper, but she comes in most days to help with cooking and such." The wagon pulled up to the front of the house, and Ethan set the brake before coming around to help Olivia down. This time, she didn't hesitate to take his hand, and her feet touched the ground of what might become her home with a strange sense of finality. "Mrs. Hatcher approached, her weathered face curious but kind. "So you're the Eastern lady," she said, looking Olivia up and down. "Got supper almost ready. You must be famished after that journey." "Thank you," Olivia said, unsure how much the housekeeper knew about their arrangement. "That's very kind." "I'll show Olivia to the cabin," Ethan said, hefting her trunk again. "We'll be in shortly." Mrs. Hatcher nodded, giving Olivia one more appraising look before heading back to the house. The collie remained, circling Olivia with cautious interest. "That's Scout," Ethan explained as they walked toward a small cabin set about 50 yards from the main house. "He's friendly, just curious." Olivia extended her hand, and after a careful sniff, Scout allowed her to pat his head. "He's beautiful." "Best cattle dog I've ever had," Ethan said with evident affection. "Smart as a whip, too." The cabin was small but charming, a single room with a bed, table, 2 chairs, and a small stove. A window looked out toward the mountains, and someone had placed a vase of wildflowers on the table. The bed was neatly made with a colorful quilt. "Mrs. Hatcher got it ready," Ethan explained, setting down her trunk. "There's a washroom added on the back. It's not fancy, but it's private." "It's perfect," Olivia said, genuinely touched by the consideration. Ethan stood awkwardly for a moment, hat in his hands. "I'll let you settle in. Supper in about half an hour if you're feeling up to it. Just come to the main house when you're ready." When she was alone, Olivia sank onto the bed, the emotions of the day finally overwhelming her. She'd done it, left everything behind, traveled across a continent, and placed her future in the hands of a stranger. A handsome stranger, she had to admit, and seemingly decent, but a stranger nonetheless. She splashed water on her face from the basin, changed her travel-stained blouse for a fresher one, and pinned her hair back into a semblance of order. Looking in the small mirror, she hardly recognized herself. The prim Boston schoolteacher was gone, replaced by a woman with windburned cheeks and determined eyes. "You can do this," she told her reflection, "one day at a time." The main house was warm and smelled of roasting meat and fresh bread. Mrs. Hatcher had prepared a veritable feast: roast beef, potatoes, green beans, and fresh-baked rolls. Ethan, who had changed into a clean shirt, stood as Olivia entered the dining room. "Perfect timing," he said. "Please sit." The meal passed in surprisingly comfortable conversation. Ethan asked about her journey but didn't pry into her reasons for coming west. He told her about the ranch instead: 2,000 acres, 300 head of cattle, plans for expansion into breeding horses. Mrs. Hatcher occasionally interjected with details about life in Promise Creek, careful to include the church socials and ladies' quilting circle, as if to reassure Olivia that civilization existed even here. After supper, Mrs. Hatcher departed for her own home in town, leaving Ethan and Olivia alone. They moved to the sitting room, where a fire crackled in the hearth against the chill of the Wyoming evening. "Would you like some coffee?" Ethan asked, seeming as uncertain as she felt about this new situation. "Please," she answered, taking a seat in an armchair upholstered in worn but clean fabric. He returned with 2 cups, handing one to her before taking a seat across from her. For a moment they sipped in silence. "I should tell you why I came," Olivia finally said, setting down her cup. "It seems only fair." Ethan shook his head. "You don't owe me explanations. Perhaps not, but I'd prefer honesty between us from the beginning." She smoothed her skirt, gathering her thoughts. "I was a school teacher in Boston. My parents died 5 years ago, leaving me with considerable debts. I managed for a while, but eventually I had to sell our home. I continued teaching, but—" She paused, the painful memory still fresh. "There was an incident. A school board member's son was failing. When I refused to change his grades, his father accused me of improper behavior with a male colleague. It wasn't true, but the mere suggestion was enough. I lost my position, and no other school would hire me." Ethan's expression had darkened. "That's a terrible injustice." "It's the way of the world," Olivia said simply. "A woman alone has few defenses against such accusations. When I saw your advertisement, I had been living in a boarding house, down to my last few dollars. So I was desperation, not choice," Ethan concluded, no judgment in his voice. "Yes," she admitted. "Though your letters seemed kind and straightforward, I thought perhaps—" "Perhaps what?" Olivia met his gaze. "Perhaps a new start in a place where no one knows me might be better than clinging to the tatters of my old life." Ethan nodded slowly. "Seems we have that in common." "What do you mean?" He stared into the fire for a long moment before answering. "I wasn't born out here. My family came from Pennsylvania when I was 12. My father was running from something, gambling debts, I think, though he never said exactly. We started over, built this place from nothing." His eyes returned to hers. Sometimes a fresh start is all a person needs. In that moment, something shifted between them, a tentative connection, a recognition of kindred spirits. "It's getting late," Ethan said finally. "You must be exhausted. I'll walk you back to the cabin." Outside, the night was clear and cold, a canopy of stars stretching overhead more brilliant than any Olivia had seen in Boston. Their breath formed small clouds in the air as they walked, Scout trotting beside them. "It's beautiful here," Olivia said, gazing upward. "It can be harsh too," Ethan warned. "Winters are long and hard, summers bring drought some years. It's not an easy life." "Few worthwhile things are easy," she replied. At the cabin door they paused. In Boston, this would be the moment for a formal goodnight, perhaps a handshake. Here, under the vast Wyoming sky, such formalities seemed ridiculous. "Thank you for the meal," Olivia said, "and for the cabin. It's very comfortable. If you need anything in the night, just call out. I'm a light sleeper." He hesitated, then added, "I'm glad you're here, Olivia. Whatever brought you, I'm glad." "As am I," she replied, surprising herself with the truth of it. Alone in the cabin, Olivia readied herself for bed, extinguished the lamp, and slipped between cool sheets. Through the window, she could see the stars and the silhouette of mountains against the night sky. So different from Boston's narrow streets and crowded buildings. So vast and wild and free, for the first time in months, she fell asleep without fear clouding her thoughts. The crowing of a rooster woke her at dawn. Olivia blinked in confusion at the unfamiliar surroundings before remembering where she was. Wyoming. Norwood Ranch, the beginning of her new life. She dressed quickly in a simple calico dress, pinned up her hair, and ventured outside. The morning air was crisp and clean, the landscape bathed in golden light. From the main house, she could smell coffee brewing and bacon frying. In the barnyard, Ethan was already at work, pitching hay to horses in a corral. He wore no jacket despite the morning chill, and Olivia found herself watching the play of muscles beneath his shirt as he worked. When he spotted her, he paused, wiping his brow with his sleeve. "Morning," he called. "Sleep well?" "Very well, thank you," she replied, approaching the fence. "It's so quiet here." He smiled, a real smile this time that transformed his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "That's one thing we've got plenty of, peace and quiet." "Is there something I could help with?" Olivia asked, eager to prove her usefulness. "I'm not familiar with ranch work, but I'm willing to learn." Ethan considered her for a moment. "Mrs. Hatcher left breakfast keeping warm on the stove. Why don't we eat first, then I can show you around, give you an idea of how things run here." Over a hearty breakfast of eggs, bacon, and biscuits, Ethan explained the rhythm of ranch life up before dawn, work with the cattle and horses, maintenance on fences and buildings, planning for changing seasons. "It's not the same as city life," he warned. "Days follow the sun, not the clock. Weather dictates more than calendars, and it's physical work, most of it." "I'm stronger than I look," Olivia assured him, "and I'm a quick learner." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I believe you are. Come on, I'll show you the place." The morning passed in a whirlwind tour of the ranch, the barn with its stalls for horses and storage for winter feed, the smithy where Ethan did his own blacksmithing, the chicken coop, the vegetable garden now mostly harvested for the coming winter, the corrals where several fine horses watched them curiously. "These are my personal stock," Ethan explained as a beautiful buckskin mare approached the fence. "I'm hoping to breed cavalry mounts eventually. The army pays well for good horses." "She's gorgeous," Olivia said, cautiously extending her hand. The mare sniffed her fingers, then allowed her to stroke her velvety nose. "That's Daisy. She's usually standoffish with strangers." Ethan sounded impressed. "You must have a way with horses." "I've always loved animals," Olivia admitted. "Though in Boston, my experience was limited to carriage horses and the occasional cat." They continued to the pastures where the cattle grazed Herefords mostly, Ethan explained, with some longhorn mixed in. 3 cowboys worked among the herd, and they tipped their hats respectfully when Ethan introduced Olivia. "That's Miguel Thomas, and the young one is Jimmy," Ethan said as they rode away. "Good men. They live in the bunkhouse during roundup and winter. This time of year they come and go." "And the rest of the time you manage alone?" Olivia asked, impressed by the scope of the operation. "Mostly. Mrs. Hatcher helps with the house, and I hire extra hands when needed." He glanced at her. "It's one reason I advertised for a wife. A place this size needs more than one person to run it properly." "You needed a partner, not just a wife," Olivia observed. "Yes," he agreed simply, "though I'd hoped for both." By midday, they had circled back to the main house, and Olivia's head was spinning with new information. They ate a simple lunch of leftover beef sandwiches, and then Ethan excused himself to return to work. "Feel free to explore on your own," he told her. "Make yourself at home. Mrs. Hatcher will be by later to start supper." Left to her own devices, Olivia decided to investigate the house itself. It was larger than it had appeared the previous evening, a sprawling structure built in stages, with the original cabin at its core. The furnishings were plain but sturdy, with unexpected touches of refinement, a bookcase filled with classics and practical manuals, a piano in the sitting room, framed sketches of wildlife on the walls. In what appeared to be Ethan's study, she found photographs, a stern-faced man and a smiling woman who must be his parents, a younger Ethan in an army uniform, a family group that included a boy who looked like a younger version of Ethan standing beside another boy. "That's my brother, Owen." Olivia startled, turning to find Ethan in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry," she said quickly. "It's all right." He stepped into the room. You should know about the family if you're considering becoming part of it. Your brother, does he live nearby?" Ethan shook his head. "He died 12 years ago now, yellow fever." "I'm so sorry," Olivia said softly. "It was a hard time, lost my mother the same year, then my father 3 years after that." His voice was matter of fact, but Olivia could hear the underlying pain. "Been on my own since I was 21. That's a heavy burden to bear alone," he shrugged, a gesture she was coming to recognize as his way of deflecting personal discussions. "Life goes on, you adapt or you break." The arrival of Mrs. Hatcher prevented further conversation, and Ethan returned to his work outside. Olivia, eager to prove her usefulness, offered to help with dinner preparations. The housekeeper was initially hesitant, clearly uncertain about Olivia's status as neither guest nor mistress of the house, but soon put her to work peeling potatoes. "So you're from Boston," Mrs. Hatcher said, kneading dough for biscuits. "Never been east of the Mississippi myself." "It's very different," Olivia acknowledged. "More people, less space, must be quite an adjustment for you." The older woman glanced at her shrewdly. "Ethan's a good man, you know, quiet, keeps to himself mostly, but decent through and through." "I'm beginning to see that," Olivia agreed. "Lost a lot, that boy has. His whole family, then his fiancée walked out on him when he wouldn't sell the ranch and moved to Denver." Mrs. Hatcher's expression darkened. "Some women aren't cut out for ranch life." Olivia absorbed this new information with surprise. He was engaged before. 3 years back, city girl from Cheyenne, wanted the prestige of being a rancher's wife but not the work that comes with it. Mrs. Hatcher shook her head disapprovingly. Broke his heart, though he'd never admit it. The conversation shifted to more practical matters where supplies were kept, the best way to preserve meat for winter, the challenges of cooking on a wood stove. By the time Ethan came in for dinner, Olivia had received a thorough education in ranch household management. Dinner was less formal than the previous night's meal, but the food was delicious: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and fresh biscuits. Mrs. Hatcher departed immediately after serving, leaving Ethan and Olivia to eat alone. "I hope Mrs. Hatcher wasn't too overwhelming," Ethan said as they ate. "She means well, but she can be forthright. I found her very informative," Olivia replied carefully. "She seems quite devoted to you and the ranch. She and her husband used to have the place next door. After he died, she sold it and started helping out here." He buttered a biscuit. "She's been like family." "She mentioned you were engaged once," Olivia said, unable to contain her curiosity. Ethan's hand paused momentarily. "She would mention that. I'm sorry if it's painful to discuss." He shook his head. "It was a long time ago. Caroline and I wanted different things. She wanted to leave Wyoming. I couldn't imagine living anywhere else. Simple as that." But Olivia suspected it hadn't been simple at all, judging by the tightness around his eyes. "Thank you for being honest." "Always will be," he promised, "even when the truth isn't pretty." After dinner, they again retreated to the sitting room where Olivia noticed the piano more carefully. "Do you play?" she asked. "Not a note," Ethan admitted. "It was my mother's. She taught piano lessons to supplement the ranch income in the early days." "May I?" Olivia asked, drawn to the instrument. At his nod, she seated herself and ran her fingers lightly over the keys. It was surprisingly well tuned. She began to play a simple melody, Beethoven's Für Elise, one of the first pieces she had mastered as a girl. Ethan watched her, his expression softening as the music filled the room. When she finished, he said quietly, "That was beautiful. My mother used to play that piece." "Music was my solace growing up," Olivia explained. "My father thought it frivolous, but my mother insisted I learn." "Would you play something else?" Ethan asked. Olivia nodded and began Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, losing herself in the familiar patterns of notes. When she finished and looked up, she was startled to find Ethan standing much closer, his eyes reflecting the lamplight. "You play like an angel," he said softly. The compliment warmed her more than it should have. "Thank you. It's been months since I had access to a piano." "Then you must play whenever you wish," he told her. "It brings the house to life again." That night, as Ethan walked her back to the cabin, something had changed between them, a cautious warmth, a tentative connection that went beyond their practical arrangement. "Good night, Olivia," he said at her door. "Good night, Ethan," she replied, lingering for just a moment before stepping inside. In the days that followed, Olivia began to find her place on the ranch. Each morning she helped prepare breakfast, then spent the day learning how to gather eggs without upsetting the hens, how to churn butter from fresh cream, how to tend the late vegetables in the kitchen garden. Mrs. Hatcher proved a patient teacher, and Olivia was determined to master these unfamiliar tasks. Ethan watched her efforts with quiet appreciation, never commenting when she made mistakes but quick to acknowledge her successes. In the evenings, they would talk sometimes about the ranch, sometimes about books they had both read, occasionally sharing carefully edited stories from their pasts. On the fifth day, rain kept them indoors, and Ethan showed her his father's library, several shelves of books ranging from practical manuals on animal husbandry to poetry and classical literature. "My father believed education didn't stop when schooling ended," Ethan explained, running his finger along the spines. "He read every night, even after the hardest days of work." "A philosophy I share," Olivia said, delighted by this unexpected treasure. "May I borrow some?" "They're as much yours as mine," he replied. "Take whatever interests you." She selected Emerson's essays, and they spent the rainy afternoon reading by the fire, comfortable in a silence punctuated only by the crackle of flames and the drumming of rain on the roof. That evening, as thunder rumbled in the distance, Ethan asked about her teaching. "I loved it," Olivia admitted. "There's nothing quite like watching a child grasp a new concept, that moment when confusion transforms into understanding." "We have a small school in town," Ethan said casually. "One room, about 15 children. The teacher left last spring to get married. They haven't found a replacement yet." Olivia looked up sharply. "Are you suggesting I apply?" "Just mentioning it," he said with studied nonchalance. "Thought you might be interested." "But what about?" She gestured vaguely. "Our arrangement, the ranch. The teaching position wouldn't interfere with ranch life. School runs from 8 to 3 and only on weekdays." He met her gaze. "And our arrangement is whatever we decide it should be, Olivia." The intimacy of her name on his lips sent an unexpected shiver through her. "I'll consider it," she promised. A week passed, then two. Olivia settled into the rhythm of ranch life, gradually taking over more household duties from Mrs. Hatcher. She began riding lessons on Daisy, the gentle mare quickly becoming her favorite companion on explorations of the ranch. Ethan proved a patient teacher, never pushing but always encouraging her to try new things. On a crisp October morning, Ethan announced it was time to ride into town for supplies. "Would you like to come along?" he asked over breakfast. "We could inquire about the teaching position while we're there." Olivia had been avoiding town, uncertain how she would be received as Ethan's mail-order bride who wasn't quite a bride, but curiosity and cabin fever won out over caution. "I'd like that," she agreed. The ride to Promise Creek took just under an hour, and Olivia was pleased to find she could now manage the wagon seat without the terror that had marked her arrival. As they approached the town, she smoothed her hair and straightened her collar, suddenly self-conscious. "No need to worry," Ethan assured her, reading her anxiety. "Folks here are generally decent, if a bit curious." Promise Creek looked marginally more civilized in the morning light than it had upon her arrival. The general store's windows gleamed, the small church's white paint stood out crisply against the blue sky, and several children played in the schoolyard of a small building at the edge of town. As the wagon rolled down the main street, Olivia was acutely aware of the stairs. Ethan guided the horses to a stop in front of the general store, then helped her down with the same careful courtesy he always showed. Mr. Norwood, the shopkeeper, a portly man with mutton chop whiskers, emerged from the store. "Been wondering when we'd see you in town again." His curious gaze shifted to Olivia. "Morning, Mr. Jenkins," Ethan replied. "This is Miss Olivia Porter. Miss Porter, Harold Jenkins owns the finest establishment in Promise Creek." "The only general store he means," Jenkins said with a chuckle, tipping his hat to Olivia. "Pleasure to meet you, miss. Mrs. Hatcher mentioned we had a new arrival out at Norwood Ranch." "The pleasure is mine," Olivia replied politely. Inside the store, Olivia browsed while Ethan conducted his business, selecting several yards of fabric and some personal items she needed. As she shopped, she overheard whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when she approached. News of her arrival had clearly spread throughout the small community. A woman about Olivia's age approached, her friendly smile seeming genuine among the curious stares. "Hello there. I'm Rebecca Miller, the doctor's wife. You must be Miss Porter." "Yes," Olivia confirmed, relieved by the straightforward greeting. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Miller. Please call me Rebecca. We don't stand on ceremony much out here." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "I was a schoolteacher myself before I married the doctor. Boston educated like yourself, from what Mrs. Hatcher tells me." "Mrs. Hatcher has been very kind," Olivia said diplomatically. "She's also mentioned you might be interested in the teaching position." Rebecca's eyes sparkled with interest. "I've been filling in since Miss Thompson left, but with the baby coming," she patted her slightly rounded stomach, "the town council is desperate for a real teacher." "I would be interested in discussing it," Olivia admitted, "though my situation is somewhat unusual." Rebecca waved a hand dismissively. "Half the women out here came as mail-order brides, myself included. The circumstances of your arrival matter far less than your qualifications." She glanced toward Ethan, who was settling his bill with Jenkins. "And you could do far worse than Ethan Norwood." "He's one of the good ones." Before Olivia could respond, Ethan approached. "Mrs. Miller," he greeted. "I see you've met Olivia. Indeed I have, and I was just telling her about our desperate need for a teacher." Rebecca smiled brightly. "The town council meets this afternoon at 2. Perhaps Miss Porter could join us and discuss the position." Ethan looked to Olivia, leaving the decision to her. "We could stay in town for the meeting if you're interested." "I would be, yes," Olivia decided, a flutter of excitement in her stomach at the prospect of teaching again. They completed their shopping, then had lunch at the small hotel dining room, a simple meal of beef stew and cornbread that nonetheless felt like a luxury after weeks of isolation at the ranch. Several townspeople stopped by their table to introduce themselves, and Olivia was surprised by the generally warm welcome. "They're curious but not unkind," she observed as they finished their meal. "Frontier towns need people," Ethan explained, "especially women. Makes for a more stable community." The town council meeting was held in the back room of the church, 5 members representing the town's business owners and prominent citizens. Olivia presented her credentials, answered questions about her teaching experience, and outlined her educational philosophy. To her surprise and delight, she was offered the position on the spot. "We're desperate," admitted the council chairman, a silver-haired man named Judge Wilson. "School's been closed since May, and these youngsters are running wild. Can you start Monday next?" Yes, I believe I can," Olivia agreed, glancing at Ethan, who nodded his support. As they left the church, Olivia felt a strange mixture of excitement and trepidation. "Do you think I'm doing the right thing?" she asked Ethan as they walked toward the wagon. "I think you're doing what you were born to do," he replied simply. "Teaching isn't just a job for you, it's a calling." His understanding touched her deeply. "Thank you for encouraging me." They stopped at the schoolhouse before leaving town, a simple one-room building with rows of desks, a teacher's desk on a small platform, and a blackboard covering one wall. It needed cleaning, but otherwise seemed well-maintained. "I'll help you get it ready before Monday," Ethan offered as they inspected the space. "We can ride in early." Standing in the empty classroom, Olivia could almost hear the future sounds of children reciting lessons, the scratch of chalk on slate, the rustle of pages turning. For the first time since leaving Boston, she felt truly hopeful about her future on the ride back to the ranch. Clouds gathered on the horizon, and by the time they reached home, a light snow had begun to fall, the first of the season. "Winter comes early up here," Ethan explained as they unloaded supplies, "and stays late." That evening, as they sat before the fire watching snowflakes dance past the windows, Olivia felt a contentment she hadn't experienced in years. "Thank you," she said suddenly. Ethan looked up from the book he was reading. "For what?" "For catching me," she said simply. "That first day when I was afraid to step down from the stagecoach, and every day since." His eyes softened in the firelight. "You're doing the catching now, I think, bringing life back to this place." "To me." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning neither was quite ready to acknowledge. But as Ethan walked her to the cabin later, the snow crunching beneath their boots, something had shifted again, another step toward a future they were slowly building together. The weekend passed in a flurry of preparation. Olivia cleaned the schoolhouse from top to bottom with Ethan's help, organized textbooks, and prepared lesson plans. By Sunday evening, everything was ready for her first day of teaching. "Nervous?" Ethan asked as they sat at the dinner table. "Terrified," Olivia admitted with a small laugh. "But excited too. It feels right somehow." "You'll be wonderful," he assured her. "Those children don't know how lucky they are." Monday morning dawned clear and cold. Ethan insisted on driving Olivia to school, though she protested she could manage the ride herself. "It's your first day," he said firmly. "I want to make sure you arrive safely." At the schoolhouse, children were already gathering in the yard, eyeing Olivia with undisguised curiosity as Ethan helped her down from the wagon. "What time should I come for you?" he asked. 3 o'clock should be fine," she replied, smoothing her skirt nervously. He hesitated, then surprised her by taking her gloved hand and squeezing it gently. "You'll be magnificent, Olivia Porter." The simple gesture and his confidence steadied her. "Thank you." 15 children ranging from 6 to 16 years old filed into the schoolhouse as Olivia rang the bell. They were a mix of backgrounds, some clearly from prosperous families, others wearing patched clothing but clean and neat. All watched her with varying degrees of curiosity and wariness. "Good morning," she began, her teacher's voice coming back naturally. "I am Miss Porter and I will be your teacher. I look forward to getting to know each of you and learning together." By lunchtime, Olivia had assessed the varying educational levels, established basic rules, and begun to learn names. The children were generally well behaved, if somewhat behind in their studies after months without formal schooling. When Ethan arrived at 3 o'clock, Olivia was standing on the schoolhouse steps bidding farewell to the last of her students. Her cheeks were flushed with excitement, her eyes bright. "Well?" he asked as he helped her into the wagon. "It was wonderful," she said, unable to contain her enthusiasm. "They're bright, eager children. Some need more structure than others, but I think we'll do well together." Ethan smiled, a full, unguarded smile that transformed his usually serious face. "I knew you'd find your place here." As autumn deepened into winter, a routine emerged. Ethan drove Olivia to school each morning, worked his ranch during the day, and collected her each afternoon. Evenings were spent in comfortable companionship, reading by the fire, Olivia playing the piano, conversations that grew increasingly personal as trust developed between them. On weekends, Olivia helped with ranch chores, gradually becoming more confident around the animals and learning the rhythms of ranch life. Ethan, in turn, showed interest in her teaching, helping to construct educational materials and listening attentively to stories about her students' progress. The small cabin remained Olivia's private space, though she spent most of her waking hours in the main house. Their courtship, unusual though it was, progressed with a slow, steady deepening of affection and respect. As Christmas approached, Promise Creek buzzed with preparations for holiday celebrations. The schoolchildren rehearsed a Christmas pageant, and Olivia found herself drawn into the community's festive planning. "The town's holding a Christmas dance," she mentioned to Ethan one evening as they ate supper. "At the hotel on Saturday, several parents have asked if we'll be attending." Ethan looked up, surprise evident in his expression. Olivia felt heat rise in her cheeks. "They seem to have formed certain assumptions about our relationship." "What did you tell them?" he asked carefully. "That I would discuss it with you." She busied herself with her meal, suddenly uncertain. "We don't have to attend if you'd prefer not to." "I'd like to take you," Ethan said quietly, "if you'd want to go with me." Olivia met his gaze, finding a vulnerability there that matched her own. "I would like that very much." The night of the dance arrived with perfect winter weather, crisp and clear, with stars glittering overhead and snow crunching underfoot as they made their way from the wagon to the hotel. Olivia wore her best dress, dark blue silk with a modest lace collar, saved from her Boston days. Ethan, in a clean suit that showed signs of infrequent wear, looked handsome and slightly uncomfortable. "You look beautiful," he told her as he helped her from the wagon, his voice low and sincere. "Thank you," she replied, noting how his eyes lingered on her face. "You look very handsome yourself." The hotel dining room had been transformed with evergreen boughs and red ribbons. A small band played in one corner, and couples already moved across the floor in time to the music. Familiar faces greeted them warmly, parents of Olivia's students, shopkeepers, ranch hands dressed in their Sunday best. "Miss Porter." Rebecca Miller waved from across the room, making her way toward them with her husband in tow. Her pregnancy was more evident now, her face glowing with health. "And Mr. Norwood, how wonderful to see you both." Introductions were made to Dr. Miller, a serious young man with kind eyes, and soon Olivia found herself swept into conversation with several mothers while Ethan was drawn away by ranchers eager to discuss cattle prices and weather predictions. When the band struck up a waltz, Ethan appeared at Olivia's side, extending his hand. "May I have this dance, Miss Porter?" She placed her hand in his, feeling the familiar calluses against her skin. "You may, Mr. Norwood." On the dance floor, Ethan surprised her with his grace. His hand at her waist was respectful yet sure, guiding her through the steps with unexpected skill. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" Olivia asked, delighted. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "My mother insisted." Said no son of hers would grow up unable to properly escort a lady around a dance floor. "She taught you well," Olivia observed as he expertly turned her beneath the twinkling lights. "I haven't had much opportunity to practice," he admitted. "Not many dances at Norwood Ranch." "Perhaps we should change that," she suggested, feeling bold in the magic of the moment. His eyes darkened slightly, his hand tightening almost imperceptibly at her waist. "Perhaps we should." They danced several more times throughout the evening, and Olivia noticed the approving glances from townspeople. By unspoken agreement, they had presented themselves as a courting couple, and the community had embraced this narrative with evident satisfaction. On the ride home, wrapped in blankets against the winter chill, Olivia felt a happiness she hadn't dared hope for when she'd first stepped off the stagecoach. "Thank you for tonight," she said softly. "I can't remember when I last enjoyed myself so thoroughly." "Nor can I," Ethan replied, his voice warm in the darkness, "though I suspect the company had more to do with it than the dancing." At the cabin door they paused as they had so many nights before, but tonight something was different. Ethan stood closer, his eyes searching hers in the moonlight reflected off the snow. "Olivia," he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle for words. "Yes," she encouraged, her heart beating faster. Instead of speaking, he slowly, carefully bent down and pressed his lips to hers, a gentle, questioning kiss that sent warmth spreading through her despite the cold night air. When he pulled back, his expression was uncertain, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. "I've been wanting to do that for weeks," he confessed. "Maybe since that first day when you took my hand stepping down from the stagecoach." Olivia reached up to touch his cheek, the rough stubble warm beneath her fingers. "I'm glad you finally did." He caught her hand, turning it to press a kiss to her palm. "Good night, Olivia Porter. Good night, Ethan Norwood," she whispered. That night, alone in her cabin, Olivia touched her lips, still feeling the impression of his kiss. She had come to Wyoming seeking security, a roof over her head, a fresh start. She hadn't expected to find a man who would awaken feelings she'd never experienced before. Christmas morning dawned bright and cold. Olivia had prepared small gifts for Ethan and Mrs. Hatcher hand-knitted scarves made during quiet evenings in her cabin. She dressed carefully in a festive red dress and made her way through the snow to the main house, where smoke already curled from the chimney. Ethan met her at the door, his smile warming her more effectively than the fire blazing in the hearth. "Merry Christmas, Olivia." "Merry Christmas, Ethan," she replied, stomping snow from her boots before entering Mrs. Hatcher had outdone herself with breakfast cinnamon rolls. Bacon, eggs, and hot coffee filled the kitchen with enticing aromas. After eating, they exchanged gifts beside the Christmas tree Ethan had cut from his own land and decorated with simple ornaments made by his mother years before. Mrs. Hatcher exclaimed over her scarf, giving Olivia an impulsive hug before presenting her with a handmade quilt. "Every home needs a proper quilt," she declared, missing or ignoring the blush that spread across Olivia's cheeks at the implication. Ethan's gift to Olivia was a small wooden box, beautifully crafted with delicate carvings of wildflowers around the edges. "I made it," he said almost shyly, "for your teaching supplies or whatever you might want to keep in it." "It's beautiful," Olivia breathed, running her fingers over the intricate work. Thank you. She handed him her gift, suddenly nervous about its simplicity. It's not much, I'm afraid. Ethan unwrapped the scarf, his expression softening as he ran his fingers over the stitches. You made this. Olivia nodded. I wanted to give you something. Personal. He wrapped it around his neck immediately. It's perfect. Thank you. Mrs. Hatcher departed shortly after gifts, heading to her sister's home in town for Christmas dinner and leaving Ethan and Olivia alone. They spent the day in pleasant companionship, reading aloud from Dickens' A Christmas Carol, playing chess, Ethan won, and preparing a simple dinner together. As evening fell, they sat before the fire, the room lit only by flames and the twinkling lights of the Christmas tree. Olivia played carols on the piano while Ethan listened, his expression peaceful in a way she rarely saw. When she finished playing and joined him on the sofa, he took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her skin. I have another gift for you, he said quietly. Though it's more of a question, really. Olivia's heart quickened. What sort of question? Ethan shifted to face her more directly, still holding her hand. These past months, getting to know you, watching you build a life here, they've been the happiest I can remember. For me as well, Olivia admitted softly. When you first came, I promised you time to know your own mind, to be sure. He hesitated, then continued. I find myself hoping that time has shown you what it's shown me, that what began as a practical arrangement has become something much more. It has, she whispered, her free hand coming up to touch the rough stubble of his jaw. Ethan turned his face to press a kiss into her palm. Olivia Porter, I love you. I love your courage and your kindness, your determination and your gentle heart. I love the way you've brought life and light back to this ranch and to me. He drew a deep breath. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife, not because of an advertisement or a practical arrangement, but because we've found something worth building a life around? Tears blurred Olivia's vision as joy welled up inside her. Yes, she said simply. Yes, Ethan, I will marry you. His smile was radiant as he drew her close and kissed her, a kiss deeper and more certain than their first, a promise of the life they would build together. They were married on New Year's Day in the small church in Promise Creek, with the entire town turning out to witness the union of their schoolteacher and the respected rancher. Olivia wore a cream-colored dress with lace at the collar and cuffs, and Ethan stood tall in a new suit ordered specially from Cheyenne. Mrs. Hatcher wept openly throughout the ceremony, while Rebecca Miller, now visibly pregnant, beamed from the front pew. The reception at the hotel was festive and joyful, with music and dancing lasting well into the evening. When they finally departed for the ranch, their home now, truly shared, the townspeople lined the street, waving and calling good wishes. At the ranch, Ethan surprised Olivia by lifting her into his arms to carry her across the threshold of the main house. Welcome home, Mrs. Norwood, he said, his voice husky with emotion. I've been feeling at home for months, Olivia confessed as he set her gently on her feet. But now it's official. That night, as husband and wife, they discovered new dimensions to their love, tender and passionate, gentle and fierce, a joining of bodies that matched the joining of their lives. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Ethan's heartbeat steady beneath her cheek, Olivia thought of that first day, how terrified she had been to step down from the stagecoach, how uncertain of her future. What are you thinking about? Ethan murmured, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. About promises kept, she replied softly. You said you'd catch me if I fell. I think you've been catching me every day since. He tightened his arms around her, and you've been catching me right back. Spring came to Wyoming, bringing green to the hills and calves to the pastures. Olivia continued teaching, now riding to school on her own horse, a wedding gift from Ethan, while also fully embracing her role as mistress of Norwood Ranch. Together, they expanded the garden, began breeding horses as Ethan had planned, and renovated the old cabin into a guest house for visiting friends. In late April, as wildflowers carpeted the meadows, Olivia shared news of her own, a child would join their family by Christmas. Ethan's joy was boundless, his tenderness toward her increasing with each passing day as her body changed to accommodate their growing child. Are you happy? He asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set behind the mountains, his hand resting protectively over the gentle swell of her stomach. Olivia leaned against his shoulder, contentment filling her completely. Happier than I ever dreamed possible. No regrets, he pressed. About leaving Boston. Answering that advertisement, she turned to face him, taking his beloved face between her hands. The only regret I could ever have would be if I hadn't found the courage to step off that stagecoach. Ethan smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling in the way she adored. I'm mighty glad you did, Mrs. Norwood. As am I, Mr. Norwood, she replied, leaning in to kiss him as the first stars appeared in the Wyoming sky. As am I. The years that followed brought all the joys and challenges of ranch life, harsh winters and glorious summers, successful cattle drives and failed crops, moments of triumph and disappointment. But through it all, Ethan and Olivia faced life together, their love deepening with each passing season. Their family grew first with Daniel, born on a snowy December night, then with Emma 3 years later, and finally Thomas, named for Ethan's father, 2 years after that. The children thrived in the freedom of ranch life, learning to ride almost as soon as they could walk, helping with chores as they grew, and receiving an education that combined Olivia's formal teaching with Ethan's practical knowledge. Promise Creek grew too, becoming a proper town with a telegraph office, a small newspaper, and eventually a railroad spur that brought increased prosperity to the region. Olivia continued teaching until the school grew large enough to require 2 teachers, at which point she gracefully retired to focus on her family and the ranch, though she remained active on the school board. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children, now adults with lives of their own beginning to take shape, organized a celebration that brought together the entire community. As Ethan and Olivia danced beneath the stars, just as they had at that Christmas dance so many years before, he whispered in her ear, "Did I ever tell you that when I sent that advertisement east, I never really expected an answer? I'd almost given up hope." Olivia smiled up at the man who had been her partner, her love, her home for a quarter century. "And I almost didn't have the courage to step down from that stagecoach. I'm glad you did," he said, his eyes still capable of making her heart beat faster after all these years. "And I'm glad I was there to catch you. You've been catching me ever since," she replied softly, "and I've been catching you right back." As they moved across the dance floor, surrounded by friends and family, both remembered that uncertain beginning, a frightened mail-order bride and a lonely rancher, 2 wounded souls who had found healing in each other's arms. From that tentative first step had grown a life richer and more fulfilling than either could have imagined. And in the years that followed, whenever new brides arrived in Promise Creek, some mail order, some not Olivia, would offer the same gentle advice. Take that first step, even if you're afraid. The right person will catch you if you fall,